Leinster have to go back to basics to beat Edinburgh. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Leinster started this game off fairly well, but they gifted a lot of points to Edinburgh. Edinburgh not having to do too much to stay in touch with them. But let's start from the start. So Leinster, they score pretty much right at the start. First, just after the first minute, Jimmy O'Brien breaks up the middle into 22. They then move it to the right. Harry Byrne, lovely hands out to Tommy O'Brien, who scores in the corner, converted for 7 points to 0. Leinster then on the attack again. They move it left, but Ioane, poor pass from him, and the move breaks down. They come again off the back of a dominant scrum on the left into the 22. Ioane, lovely skip pass out to Tommy O'Brien, and he gets it down in the corner, converted from the touchline, 14 points to 0. And something, well, it's fresh in my memory as well, both Harry Byrne and Thompson were really good off the tee today as well. Thompson with, he seemed to actually get the good ones and miss the easier ones. But, Harry Byrne absolutely immaculate off the tee. We then have a Timo check for a high hit by McConnell on Keenan. Keenan already been tackled, he's most of the way onto the ground, having been tackled low when he gets hit. And the officials say, yeah, always falling, no foul play. And for me, pretty fair call. Let's then look to attack off a scrum for an own 22. They work it up to around the 10-metre line. But Furlong's pass is too far for Osborne. It goes to ground. Shields snapples up the loose ball, and he's got a clear run in. Conversion missed, 14 points to 5. Edinburgh then strike off a central scrum around halfway. Shield to Thompson. He drifts through a gap and then shows great pace to finish in the corner. The ball falls off the tee with 5 seconds to go, but Thompson doesn't panic at all. Puts it back on, strokes the ball over from out wide as well. Brilliant kick for 14 points to 12. Gilchrist then not rolling away. Byrne puts Leinster 10 metres out. Sheehan off the back of a maul, recycled and spun back wide to Jimmy O'Brien to go over, converted again from out wide for 21 points to 12. Edinburgh then on the attack. Porter gets in, turns the ball over. Leinster look to spin it wide, but Thompson intercepts and he's under the post, converted for 21 points to 19. Gilchrist then playing Baird's arm in the line out. Leinster kick to the corner. They move it inside off a dummy maul. They then go back out to the right. Ioane to Keenan, who rides a tackle to go over to score, converted for 28 points to 19. Leinster then look to run it from a scrum in their own half. MacLeod picks up a pass from Byrne to Gibson pass, and he's got a run in to score again, converted 28 points to 26 half time. Yeah, and Leinster's, just a little bit of inaccuracy, but also Edinburgh just reading those passes a bit too easily and picking off so many of them to keep themselves in the game. In the second half then, Leinster, it's noticeable that in this half they tighten things up. They go back to more simple rugby, using the big carries to make the ground, and then not really spinning it wide until it's properly on. Then they're basically going back to the whole sledgehammer approach rather than the rapier. Leinster then break down the right through Tommy O'Brien. Sheehan then carries it on well, move it inside the 22, go through a number of phases, probing for a chink. Van der Fleer carries into contact. Edinburgh tried to hold him up, but Van der Fleer muscles his way through to ground on the line, but we have a Timo check, and it's really dropped the ball as he went to place it. no try. I heard the guys in the commentary saying it was a bit harsh, but you can see there's definitely separation when he's going to place it, and he basically puts his hand on the ball, but he's clearly dropped the ball. So I don't really know what they're complaining about. So no try there. Leinster then come again, but Edinburgh managed to hold Van der Fleur up this time, and they turn it over in the maul. Leinster continue to attack, but Edinburgh are dealing with it fairly well. I was impressed with the defence around this period, at least in the game. They then come forward. Darcy Graham picks up a charge down kick. It was from their own side, and it was one of those where it's kind of half charged down and it goes sideways, and he was out wide, or at least out the 15-meter channel, and he then chips over, wins the race to the ball, and gets over to score. Thompson then hits the post with conversion, 31-28, and Edinburgh hit the lead. Penalty to Leinster, they kick it to the corner. Edinburgh halt them all, but then they get pinged for offside. Leinster up to tap. Sheehan gets close, recycled. Van der Fleur gets over to score, converted for 35 points to 31. Leinster then coming forward again, but Douglas, he's on as a sub, gets over the ball to win a penalty, and that guy, absolute beast over the ball. He's one of the most turnovers in the you're seeing. You see why, and he's a young player who's going to have, I think, a bright future. The main thing I feel is is stay injury free. Next year, I think this year he's done really well. Next year could be a real breakout year for him, though, just in terms of getting more starts, getting more involved. He's been capped by Scotland already, but getting more involved with the Scotland team as well. Like he is a really good young player, and it feels like that Edinburgh pack absolutely need the momentum of somebody like him staying fit and kind of bringing that energy and enthusiasm that can really suddenly lift the pack. Leinster then score up and under. It's bad back on the Leinster side, but Keenan, he was very good in the air today. Van der Fleur then gets that loose ball, carries, it's recycled out to Ioane, who makes good ground in the 22. It's recycled, and then Clarkson has the power to get to the line, dots it down, convert from 42 points to 31. Van der Fleur then turns the ball over, and Leinster send it wide left. Gibson Park, lovely ball out to Ioane, and then he continues on the trailing run on the inside. Ioane breaks up the left wing, sells a dummy inside to Gibson Park that basically takes Darcy Graham out of the picture, and he goes over himself in the corner, converted for 49 points to 31. We then have both teams looking to get another score after that, but no real major chances, and that was our full-time score. So we're going to have a look at the stats, and then we'll come back and talk about each of the teams. So let me pull the stats up here on the official website, and we will go from there. So first up, tries, 7 tries to 5. Leinster obviously will be happy with the fact that they manufactured 7 tries, but certainly won't be happy with conceding 5 of them, especially when 3 of them in the first half were from their own errors. And you really feel like that, and then obviously another intercept at that as well. It feels like Edinburgh basically created one decent chance and they scored it as well, which is certainly not good from the Leinster point of view either. But, again, the talking commentary about it being Leinster's best attacking display of the season. Personally, I didn't feel it was that, because in that first half, they were trying to, as I said, to kind of have that rapier-like, precision, cutting the team open that we've seen from Leinster teams in the past, and they actually just wasn't there, and it was too easy for Edinburgh to read, and then they had to go back to that kind of sledgehammer, bash it up approach, suck the defence in and then go to spreading it wide, where they had more success because they'd obviously created more space. So for me, there's still plenty to work on that attack. And when you think about it, I would say, Leinster defence certainly at fault for the try that Edinburgh scored off first phase from the scrum, but the rest of Edinburgh's scores came from mistakes on the Leinster attack, not from the Leinster defence. So for me, you gotta look at that as well. So definitely a lot of more work to do on that attack. Then conversions, 7 conversions to 3. So if it was going to be a tight game, just Harry Byrne and MacLeod off the tee for Leinster and putting over those extra points. And it's definitely something that Leinster have missed in big games in recent years and this year as well, where they ended up, when it's kind of high scoring like that with a lot of tries, you can end up being more to score behind just because you're not taking your extra 2. But he, as said, he was absolutely brilliant. I thought Thompson, though, was good for Edinburgh as well. On attack then, 618 metres made to 411, and that's from 137 carries to 71. So Leinster more carries, more metres made, but Edinburgh making more metres per carry. They had pretty much half the number of carries, but 2/3 of the metres made. Clean breaks then 17 to 9, and that's for Leinster 20 defenders beaten and Edinburgh 17. So it means Leinster almost every time that they beat a defender, they made a break. Now, also, you have to think of the fact, yes, Leinster scored 7 tries, but they made 17 clean breaks. So, at times Edinburgh's scramble was pretty good and did pretty well. But, it's very typical of Edinburgh. It's like it's in patches, right? Decent defensive patches and some other good work at patches as well. From the Edinburgh point of view, then 9 clean breaks from 17 defenders beaten it's just over 50% conversion rate. Offloads then 9 to 5. Edinburgh showing that ambition with the ball, and as I said, at times it clicked pretty well, but it still didn't feel like a really slick Leinster performance in attack to me. Again, the experts you see on TV obviously have a lot more rugby experience, rugby knowledge than me, but for me watching it, it still did not feel like a Leinster team in top gear on attack, honestly. Passes then 196 to 94, so Leinster pretty much double. And then possession 62% to 38, and territory 68 to 32. So Leinster dominating the ball, most of that ball in the Edinburgh half as well. So you can see why they created so many chances. But again, a lot of it in terms of what they conceded was off the back of poor attack rather than poor defence. On to defence then. So 74 tackles to 154. Leinster are 73% in the tackles made. And that's pretty much Leinster for most of the season, because they use that, high line speed, the umbrella defense. If you can get out onto the edge, you're going to have opportunities. But also because they use shooters, there's going to be a lot of missed tackles as well. But I thought that, when they needed to, they scrambled pretty well. Obviously, with the intercepts, there was no opportunity for them to scramble, because when your whole defense has to turn around when you're on attack, it's very hard to actually track back. 80% for Edinburgh is decent. 80% for me at Champions Cup level, especially in the knockout rounds, a team is doing decent. That's round about, a pass mark for a good defensive performance. Leinster have often been, lower than that, simply because of the way that they defend. And the judgment really for the Leinster defensive performance is when you look at how many clean breaks the opposition have and how many of those were actually turned into scores, and they did okay on it. I'm not going to say it was a brilliant defensive performance from Leinster, because it wasn't. They still there were still certainly issues there, and Darcy Graham, his try was definitely some individual brilliance, but also just in terms of the way the Leinster defence dealt with that. They didn't deal with it very well. I felt, with the sweeping in behind and stuff. So definitely improvement there. It's not just the attack that needs to improve, it's that defence as well. Turnovers 1, then 4 each. Onto set piece. Lineouts, 15 lineouts, 1 for 83% for Leinster. So I think that's 15 from 19. Would kind of make sense on that, right? It's something like that, 15 from 18 or 19. And then Edinburgh, 10 lineouts, 1 for 91%. So that would be 10 from 11. Scrums then, 5 from 5 for Leinster, 8 from 8 for Edinburgh. Leinster, when the scrum actually completed, were definitely the ones that had the nudge on the scrum, but they had issues with their setup, and they were giving away free kicks, which were upgraded to penalties later on because they kept doing it, kept taking the space from Edinburgh as well. So that's definitely another work on for them. Onto kicking, 23 kicks to 28 for 619 meters and 786. So looking at that, you got Leinster kicking less than 30 meters per kick, and Edinburgh are kind of somewhere similar on their point of view, but maybe a little bit longer. So retained kicks then 4 for Leinster, 2 for Edinburgh. And I felt in that second half, Leinster, when they kind of tightened things up a little bit, and they used that aerial ability a little bit more, it definitely got them some front foot ball. But it's definitely a risky tactic. If you do that against the likes of Bordeaux or maybe Toulouse when they're in really good form, if they counter off the back of that, you could be basically kicking them the ball for them to score a try down the other end. So that's something definitely Leinster have to be conscious of. Then onto the breakdown. 89 rucks won to 41, 2 rucks lost for Edinburgh and none for Leinster. 99% ruck success to 93. So, Leinster really looking after the ball very well. Then turnovers 1 in rucks and mauls, 4 each. Mauls, Leinster 3 successful from 4, and Edinburgh 3 from 3. There wasn't like a huge amount in terms of the impact of mauls. Leinster, again, I've said it so many times, for me, and we saw it in this game, I think it was really well highlighted that Leinster have one of the poorest mauls, I feel, certainly of any URC team. And you saw in this game, and you saw the reason why sometimes they can still go forward or even score tries off the back of mauls, is because Dan Sheehan in the pocket, his ability to read the defence and know when to launch himself off the back, and his ability just to make meters beyond contact as well, turns what is an average to poor maul into something that actually looks good if you're just looking purely at stats in terms of scores that come either from mauls or adjacent to mauls as well. But you saw that in this game, like their maul was stalled a few times. It was only Sheehan's ability that really got them back that momentum and that front foot. And also, Leinster's maul defence has been poor for a long time as well. I think, Joe McCarthy is certainly someone who has that ability to get into the middle of mauls and, cause a bit of disruption. And, having him there certainly would help them against a team that maybe mauls a little bit more heavily than Edinburgh. Now, onto discipline. So penalties conceded, just 3 for Leinster, is brilliant. No pressure on the set piece, especially to scrum. Certainly helped with that, but good discipline overall. 7 conceded for Edinburgh, which is not a bad total either. We always talk about keeping in single figures, and they kept it well in single figures as well from their point of view. Okay, so let's talk about the two teams. So I'm going to start with Edinburgh. So for Edinburgh, this really was a kind of a final for them, as it were. We hear a lot of talk about that now in sport these days, kind of labeling games that aren't finals because of the importance it carries to a team. You look at that Edinburgh squad, they're sitting 13th in the URC. They've got, still got a mathematical chance of making the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. Edinburgh know that. Everyone else knows that, because it will take an absolute miracle and a collapse by 3 or 4 of their teams for them to even get anywhere close to it. So it meant that this really was, the big game for them, trying to get through to the Champions Cup. And if they won this game, the impact it would have had for Edinburgh, I think, would have been absolutely seismic. To go over to Dublin, to the Aviva Stadium against a Leinster team who, in fairness, are not at the same level as we've seen Leinster be in recent years, but at the same time, they're still Leinster. They still won all of their games in the pool stages. They're still 4th in the URC as well, and they've still got tons of Ireland internationals in that team as well, and with the likes of Rico Ioane as well to bolster their ranks too. So to be able to go over there and if they pulled off a win here, I think you would have seen some proper progress finally from this Edinburgh team. And I'm not talking about this season just because they got into a quarter final. I'm just talking about that mental switch that happens to a team when suddenly they go somewhere where everyone's expecting them to get knocked out, and they upset the apple cart and they actually produce. Because the problem with this Edinburgh team is, for me, it's certainly not a lack of talent. You look at the talent that they have at their disposal. It's certainly more a mental thing. Certainly they could do with bolstering their pack a little bit. I don't think anyone would dispute that, but at the same time, there certainly is, sprinkled with plenty of talent there as well. And, you can go back in the past and look at teams kind of who were in similar situations, even go back to Glasgow maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where you had that potential in the squad and they just weren't delivering. And Edinburgh, I think, are maybe not like at the same level in terms of, getting themselves in more positions the way Glasgow did, but it still felt like they could have taken a step forward in this if they had got the win. I do think that the way that they stood up to Leinster, certainly in the first half, will be a bit of a boost for them, but it's a case of, can they take that and go on from it? Because it's a lot easier to, once you've got that win, you got that something tangible to say, okay, this is our marker now. We were able to reach this level. We've got to, this is what we aim for now in the future, and go beyond it as well. Whereas when it's on the back of the feet, I think it's a lot harder to actually do that. So I think it will be a boost for them, certainly in the short term, but it feels like Edinburgh next year, because now really that's where their thoughts need to be, right? They've got 4 games left in the URC and their season's going to be over. So you got 4 games to really start looking at what way are you going to be playing next year? Who are the players who maybe this year have been kind of fringe, or young players coming through? Who's going to put the hands up basically for next season and say, I'm ready for the step up. I'm ready to improve this team. for next season. So I think that's where Edinburgh are. But, it's a decent performance from them. So, and you think like a lot of people, especially when Leinster go 14-0 up, thought, okay, well, Leinster are just going to end up hockeying them. It was, I think the scoreline in the end kind of flattered Leinster, honestly, in terms of the performance of the two teams. So, yeah, Edinburgh, decent performance, but they didn't have enough, when it came to that second half where, again, Leinster tightened things up and Edinburgh had to produce. And, other than the Darcy Graham basically producing his own score, didn't produce too much beyond that. But again, I think it's, in terms of going into the Champions Cup, I thought they acquitted themselves well this year. It's a pity they're not going to be in it next year, because you're not going to have that kind of backing up of it and going again next year that Glasgow have kind of benefited from. But still, for it to be probably the last, honestly, big game of the season, I thought they acquitted themselves well. On to Leinster then. It's a good start from them. Some good performances. Some good attack, but again, I don't buy the whole thing of it being the Leinster's best attacking performance, because you look at the mistakes that were there and what that led to, the number of scores that they conceded on the back of that. For me, still not quite there. Just definitely work to be done on that. Knowing some sections of the Irish media and the Leinster fan base, they look at the fact that Leinster conceded 5 tries and they'll be saying, oh, it's Nienaber's defence, that caused that. And for me, that's kind of a red herring. Again, most of what Leinster conceded today wasn't because of defensive errors. It was errors in attack. So certainly the attack needs to be looked at, because you could see it at times, not just from the mistakes where they conceded, but also you could see times where Leinster were maybe putting the ball out to the right, and you could see that there were times when Keenan was coming in to join the line. I know he's not back all that long, but you can see he's kind of overrunning potential passes, and he's not the furthest out either. So because he's overrunning, he takes himself out as an option, and he takes a player outside him out as an option, unless the ball carrier wants to go for a risky over the top pass that could again be intercepted. Then you could see other ones where ball carrier would have to jump to catch the ball and be stripped of momentum as well. You saw those interplays where guys were either standing too close to each other or running at slightly the wrong angle, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that normally from a Leinster team that is progressing through the season, you would expect to be seeing in maybe, October, late November, coming into the start of the Champions Cup, not at Champions Cup round of 16 level. So, and we talked about before how Leinster trying to play themselves into form. For me, they're still not there. If you had, imagine Bordeaux or Toulouse as the opposition today, Leinster, conceding that many tries on attack, and then add on, how many tries that teams like that firing would have got off their own attack as well. I think Leinster would have been well behind and maybe almost game over by half time on that. So definitely plenty of work to do there. Set piece is certainly improving. Scrum is improving, but again, that setup for the scrum, making sure don't give away silly things like referees talking to you about your setup, about engaging too early. Listen to him the first time. Don't do it the next time. Just simple things, leadership on the field, that should be there. And is maybe missing at times. That needs to be sorted out. The line out went well overall, but misfired kind of in that area where it was kind of close between the teams as well. You'd like to see more accuracy from that around that time, just to give that kind of a bit more solidity to the team and not have extra worries on top of what was going wrong for them already. But there's a lot of positives as well. A lot of good performance there. Ryan Baird back in. I thought he did very well. Ustinov coming off the bench looked really good. Clarkson looked good. That starting front row now of Porter, Sheehan, Furlong are starting to look decent there as well. Baird and McCarthy went well in that second row partnership. That was good. Conan at 6. It looked a little bit off when they started doing that, like in recent weeks, but that's starting to look a bit better. The balance between himself and Doris in that back row. Van der Fleur is playing better, and Harry Byrne at 10. Harry Byrne at 10 was excellent, and for me, and you can go back and watch the videos from early on in the season. I said that Harry Byrne for me should be Leinster's number 1. This was like coming in, basically from the start of the season, but all the way up through into the Six Nations as well. I saying he should be number 1. Prendergast, should be looked after properly. Shouldn't just be dumped, but should have to fight for his place in the team. Because Byrne was the guy who was actually performing, and he's the guy you see. He has the confidence off the tee that we're not seeing from, we're not seeing it from Prendergast. Crowley has been up and down with it. For me, if you're just looking at it from an Ireland point of view, right, in my mind, the rankings of the 10 is Crowley is your number 10, and I don't understand why it's constantly, Crowley has to work miracles just to keep hold of the 10 shirt. And for me, that's stupid, because he's clearly been the most consistent for Ireland over the last period. So he should be your starting 10. And then if you want to rotate, but it is rotation rather than, picking another 10 to start and be the number 110, as it were. Byrne is your number 2, and then Prendergast is your number 3, because he definitely has work-ons. And I don't believe he should be dumped or out of the pitch or wherever. He should be helped. He's a young guy coming through. He's not going through the best period at the minute. And that's the way it should have been managed. But through the Six Nations, Harry Byrne pretty much didn't get a sniff, and it didn't make sense to me, honestly. But we saw in this game, played very, very well. Good combination with Gibson Park. Again, both of them maybe overplaying a little bit in that first half. But again, that's about, I think, the attacking system, not quite right on the lines, dummy players, it felt like Edinburgh in that first half were able to basically eliminate from their minds the dummy runners because they weren't believable. And that makes it so much easier then to know where passes are going to go and to get into that passing line and pick off the passes the way they did, get those intercepts. But then as well, Jimmy O'Brien was decent on one wing, Tommy O'Brien exceptional on the other, Keenan looking better. At fullback, he's obviously still kind of working his way back in. Centres then, Ioane, one of his better performances, certainly not perfect. And then Osborne is kind of, for me, a bit of an unsung hero, really, just in terms of doesn't complain, you stick him wherever, and he does the job for you. And my worry for him is that if Leinster do get further in this competition, that, because it happens a lot where, let's say you have Ioane, you've got Ringrose back, and you have Henshaw, then, you're going to have 2 of those starting and the third one on the bench. And then unless there are injuries, Osborne is going to be out for your 23. Whereas for me, he's a perfect player that if he's not, well, for me, he should be the starting 12. but he's not. He should be your 23 because of his versatility to cover the back line. So, and I feel like himself and maybe Frawley as well, as players start coming back from injury, maybe kind of pushed out of the equation, the match day 23. And as well, we haven't been talking about someone who wasn't even involved and hasn't, but for me, Charlie Tector has been Leinster's best centre this year. He's had some injuries and stuff, but he's a player who, if he was available for a game like this, should have been involved somewhere. He's a young player looking to develop him, and this is the experience that players like that need. Coming on in these games, there's no point in a player like that of his ability just being stuck in the Leinster system and not getting the game time that needs to develop. So that's another kind of watch the space because for me personally, I'm a Leinster fan, but I'd rather see him playing at Munster or Connacht or Ulster or wherever if he's getting more game time than he is at Leinster. But yeah, overall, again, it's a win for Leinster, but it's still not a convincing, like, it's one of those ones where you're just waiting for the other penny to drop, right? You're waiting for Leinster to come up against one of the big teams and almost to be found out, as it were. So, they've got Sale next week. No guarantees they're going to get through that. That's going to be an examination for them as well. Whereas you go back a couple of seasons and you're probably thinking, rightly or wrongly, but looking at results, you could certainly say rightly that they'd be winning it like by 30 or 40 points. Nobody, like, unless you're delusional, nobody's thinking that at the minute. You're thinking Sale are going to come, Sale are going to see what's happened to Leinster so many times this season and to the back end of last season as well. And I think we've got a chance here, put a bit of pressure on them. There's that soft centre to them at the minute that maybe wasn't there previously, where you can get at them, you can cause mistakes, you can capitalise on errors, you can stay in the game, produce some decent rugby yourself, get yourself into a lead, make Leinster chase you, and possibly get yourselves into a semi-final. So that's where Leinster are. And in other seasons, I think people would have been looking more towards, who would Leinster be playing in the semi-final? Normally, at the minute you're thinking with the semi-finals, you got Bordeaux and Glasgow certainly looking like they're on the way to semi-finals. Again, rightly or wrongly, Toulouse looking like they're coming into proper form as well for there. But Leinster, I don't really feel it at the minute. I feel like it possibly could be a quarterfinal exit or maybe even semi-final embarrassment for Leinster this year. But they still have time. There are excellent coaches there, obviously, at Leinster. They know hell of a lot more about rugby than people like me. And they have the ability to get those players going, because we've seen these players produce some really good performance, mainly in green this year, but we have seen them do that. So it's up to those Leinster coaches, get them doing the same in blue, and then let's see where Leinster go from there.